Welcome to the College Knowledge Podcast, sponsored by the College Planning Network and Paradigm Financial Group. Whether you're searching for that right fit college, applying to college, or figuring out how you're going to afford it all, you're in the right place. You'll hear from deans, admissions counselors, student athletes, and scholars from esteemed universities and colleges around the country. We'll dig deep to uncover their insight and unique experiences. So whether you're a student gearing up for college or a parent with college-bound kids, sit back, relax, and listen. Like you, we have lots of questions. Our guests have the answers, and we're excited to share them with you. Let's get started. Welcome back to College Knowledge. I'm your co-host, Dave Kozak, alongside my dear friend and colleague, Joe the College Pro, Mr. Joe Kerns.
Dave the CEO, always good to be with you, sir. How's your world been?
Crazy, man.
Yeah.
It is the season, right?
It is the season. Hard to believe. Totally lost track of where I was at in the month and what day it was.
Between admissions season, financial aid season, it's all coming together, which,
yeah.
Joe, we got a great guest today, and we'll be able to have a really nice conversation and learn the ins and outs. But before I bring her on, let me introduce her. She's the author of Scholars Get Dollars. Her website is capturegreatness.org, and her name is Melissa Rowe. Melissa, welcome to the show.
Thank you both. Thank you both, Dave and Joe.
Melissa, give us your background a little bit. Introduce the audience to what you do and how you got here. Give us the story.
Yeah, so I'm from Philly. I started in college access over a decade ago, and I was working in lower income Philadelphia public high school. And so I realized that we were doing a really good job getting students to college, but not keeping them there. So my students were returning to the school, and I'm like, well, what's on your roster for this semester? And they'll say, oh, I'm taking a break. And so I realized that so many Philadelphia students were taking time off from college, not because they didn't have the potential, it was because they didn't have the money to continue to go to school. I just started wondering, well, who's responsible for making sure students have the money? And guess what? It's the parents, right? But we don't do a good job prepping parents for the financial expense of college. And so I started scholarship clubs. From that became Capture Greatness Scholarship Coaching. And today I'm really proud to say that I've helped students win over $12 million in scholarships for college. So that had become my philosophy. If I'm going to be in this work, I'm going to help students get to school with the money they need to succeed.
What would you say the number one misconception families have about scholarships is?
One thing I think that families don't understand is your scholarship strategy is not separate from your college application and admission strategy. And so over the years, I've heard so many parents say, we'll wait to see what the school offers and then we'll work on scholarships. And scholarship season is really running in tandem with college application season. So by the time families realize there's going to be such a gap in that financial aid for them, they've missed so many opportunities for a senior to actually have applied for and won scholarships.
Dave and I know when we do our workshops and presentations, I think one of the most common questions is, where do you find scholarships? It's something that people always ask. And again, I think the concept that I've always said to people is obviously one place, always look at employers. The kids are working or the parents working, talk to the employers. After that, the best resource to use is the college counselors at school, because there's probably some local things that they know about. What am I missing when I tell families that? When I say, hey, I can't say this is where you find things, but I can tell you where potentially to look. So what do you know that I'm not telling families that maybe parents should know?
Yeah, the bulk of scholarship dollars actually lives at the colleges and universities themselves. We think about maybe FAFSA giving us access to federal aid, but if you are a family that's not going to qualify for federal aid, like in Pennsylvania, if you're Pell Grant eligible, then you're FIA eligible, which is our PA state grant, right? But if you are a family that's not going to be eligible for federal and state grant money, you really want your child to be a competitive candidate for the colleges and universities that have more money to award. And sometimes that's merit. And if we're talking about our super competitive colleges and universities like the Ivy Leagues, they're not going to award merit-based aid. It's going to be need, but still that threshold for income is going to be higher. That's the thing that I want parents to understand. If you know that your child is going to need or you want them to get scholarships, it needs to be a part of your college application strategy, because the places that house the largest amounts of scholarship dollars are actually the colleges and universities. And then, Joe, I would recommend what you said. Is your child employed by an employer that might be able to support them in college? Does your benefits come with something that can support your student through school? The national search engines are great. There's one website that I like. They were well known a while ago for micro scholarships, but the utility for this is even larger, and that's Raise Me. And so when students create a Raise Me profile, it also helps them demonstrate interest. So students are basically plugging in all of the things that they're doing over the course of their high school career, and they're earning micro scholarships. But as the technology has advanced, it allows colleges and universities to reach out to them based on their profile on Raise Me. And if they are admitted to one of the schools that they have on their list, they're guaranteed the micro scholarship amounts that they've accumulated over time.
I like the way you stated that your scholarship strategy and your admission strategy need to be cohesive, because it's undeniable that of the $190 billion given out every year, a large majority of the free money, the grants and scholarships, comes from the institutions themselves, right? They have endowment funds, they have allocated resources specifically for this. What advice do you give families when they're going out and looking at these schools? And I'll use the example. We do a lot of presenting nationally on the subject matter. And in Pennsylvania, we have three sort of levels of institution, right? You have your straight private institutions. You have your land grant, state funded, but not state owned schools in the Temple, the Pitt, the Penn State. And then you've got your PSAC schools, which are owned by the state of Pennsylvania, and people get into that way. And the price points are all different. How do you help someone modify their strategy of the schools they're looking at? Because a lot of people just face it and say Temple's going to cost $35,000 and Westchester is going to cost $28,000. I went to Franklin and Marshall, and Franklin and Marshall is $98,000. But that's not how it actually plays out. How do you explain that and help people understand that?
So, the first thing that I want parents to understand is that don't look at the school sticker price when you are asking your child to create a college list. We know that some of the schools that cost more, that's how they're valuing their education, right? And so it doesn't necessarily mean that's the cost to you as a student or as the family. It means that this is how we value our education, but those could be the schools, and usually are the schools that have more merit or financial aid available to students. So I always tell parents, you don't want to discourage your kids from applying to schools because you feel like this is out of your price range. You don't know what that school's like generosity or funding policy is. But what's more important though is by the time our students get to the senior year, you want them to be strong candidates for any of these schools, because the thing that's really going to hurt parents' pockets is if my child can only get into some of the least competitive schools. And in the state of Pennsylvania, right, we don't do such a good job at funding our schools. So even though it's a sticker price of maybe $24,000, I'm in Philly. So if your child is coming from a Philadelphia school trying to get to Bloomsburg, it also means you then have to pay room and board, which instantly increases the amount of the education. If they were able to get into a Temple or a Drexel, right, they might be able to commute. So you might be able to save money there. So one of the things that I want all parents and students to know is this journey to college and scholarships really starts much earlier. Here's the thing. If you factor for being a good scholarship candidate, it takes care of being a good college admission candidate, because a lot of the external scholarships like Coca-Cola, I did the math a few years ago. I was at a conference and Coca-Cola only awards 2% of their applicants the Coca-Cola scholarship. And I'm like, that's tighter than Harvard. So if you think about it in that way, if you are actually building scholars, then they'll be able to access external scholarships if you'll have need, and they'll be able to access entry into the institutions with more money to give.
So I guess the piece that I'm hearing is that in essence, the scholarship side of things, it's really the same thing. So how different is we'll say the scholarship world from that, like the same admission, or is it truly just one and the same is what you found?
It's really not one and the same. And my expertise is in writing. So I'm a writing coach for students. And so I like to present it to students like this. When you're applying to college, it's an open invitation, right? The college or university allows you to write about why you think you're going to be a good fit for that institution or that this will be a good relationship. For scholarships, though, it is more like an exclusive party. So you have to be invited. So you have to meet GPA criteria. You might also need to have community service experience, certain number of hours of community service. You might need to show your leadership potential based on the things that you've been doing. For some of the more competitive scholarships, you'll need more numbers of recommendation. I had 4 students who won a Gates Millennium Scholarship. It required them to write 8 essays, which most colleges, right, do not. Even in your Ivies with your supplemental, you never get to 8 essays. But it also required their recommenders to know a lot about them and write about 4 different narratives on who those students are. They are running together, but the students who are going to make out the best are essentially going to be the ones who can access institutions where the bulk of their money can come from there. There are other spaces. So like we have foundations that we go to. There are going to be private community-based scholarships. And so this is what I mean by a scholarship strategy. Now, if you have a student that's a senior, but they're going into their senior year with a 2.5 GPA, we know that they might not get admission into some of the schools that have more lucrative scholarship dollars for them. So we need to do a better search of the community-based scholarships. And in the book, I outline 14 different categories of scholarships so students and parents can understand where you should be looking based on your student's profile. And I think that's really important. So there's going to be employer-based, but there might also be faith-based affiliations, right? There can be scholarships awarded based on physical, mental ability, based on hardships in terms of overcoming different health challenges or circumstances in your family. There's a lot of places to get scholarships from. I just want parents to understand that the majority of the scholarship dollars that exist at colleges and universities. But we continue throughout a student's time getting to college and in college looking for scholarships, and they come in different names. There might be a fellowship that a student can get as a current college student. So that's how I like to break it out so that parents are understanding, yeah, you can get scholarships, but you don't want your kid spending their entire senior year trying to rack up individual $1,000 scholarships when they can go after really heavy hitter ones. And the thing that's going to bring most people ease is seeing that scholarship awarded with the admission.
It's been pretty well documented that the top 25% of the incoming freshman class at most schools get preferential treatment from a merit scholarship standpoint. Aside from the need met schools, the schools that meet 100% of need, I think when we talk about strategy, we talk a lot about the caliber of school that you're looking at. And we spend a lot of time on best academic, social, and financial fit, right? Mm-hmm. So it's this trifecta of fit that we're looking at. And for parents, they're often looking at a tier above maybe where they should be, because if you go down a tier, there's money on the table for you. Mm-hmm. And you're not going to convince me ever, no one's going to convince me ever, that one school is worth 3 times as much as another school. It just doesn't, you can't prove it. The only way you could prove it to me is if you took the average lifetime earning of every graduate, because at the end of the day, the idea is the education and then the utility of lifestyle beyond the education, right? So some people go into mission work, some people go into nonprofit work, some people go into for-profit work, but that personal utility or satisfaction that someone achieves outweighs sometimes that lifetime earning. So there is no way to justify that education at school A is worth $90,000 a year and education at school B is worth 30, and I should pay the $60,000 a year premium to go to school A, right? It just doesn't happen that way. You've given us a lot of insight into the scholarship. I like the tandem sort of theory. You're going to go through, and for families that don't understand this, you're going to go through this process of application and financial aid. When you submit the financial aid forms, the FAFSA or the CSS profile, you are in fact telling the school to consider you for any scholarship they have at that institution. We are looking for money. We are looking for help. Please help us. The schools then get get to dole that out. The private scholarships that you're talking about, Gates Foundation and some of the other stuff, those are the ones where they can have you write 8 essays. They can have you send a video. They can really do whatever they want. One of the scam warnings we always talk about is if you ever have to pay, it's not a real scholarship. When you talk about the Gates one, because the 8 essays, that's intense, there has to be a pretty motivated student on the other end of that. It has to really engage in a pretty comprehensive process. Do you find that most students are willing, or they'll go through that effort? Or is it like grinding and gnashing of teeth to get them to do it, to realize the future is in their hands?
Yeah, most students are not willing to do it. And honestly, what I found when I was trying to understand why my students were leaving college without the money they needed, I found that most of the students I was working with, they only applied to colleges that didn't even require an essay. So when it came time for them to apply for scholarships, they only did like the no essay scholarships that really puts you in someone's database, but not get you real scholarship results. And so that is the challenge. The ability for students to be able to write strong essays is something that has to be cultivated. And so you want to make sure that your children are not just thinking about the assignments they're given, but thinking about how what they're doing on the day-to-day has greater implications. Okay, you're volunteering in senior center maybe because mom told you to, but what is this waking up for you? How are you seeing the needs of other people differently? Is it sparking a desire in you to do something? Have you found a cause that you want to contribute to maybe later in life because of the things that you're doing? Or did you find that you're a natural leader because, of your participation in these sports? And I think one of the challenges is that our students aren't being asked to really talk about themselves and to think about those things until it's time to apply to college. And they're like, so why do our values align with yours? And they're like, I never thought about that. So having those conversations ahead of time is really good for students, but there is a disconnect, and students shying away from writing is a major barrier to their success on either end.
And now you have the advent of AI. Unfortunately, I think the barrier to good writing is going to get harder for people
Yeah.
to be authentic. My takeaway is teach kids how to write early, force them to write often. And it's a skill that it requires thought to be able to take something conceptual, put it on paper, and be able to have the reader understand it. And that is the purest basis of communication, right? I can talk it to you, but can I put it in a document, and can I stamp my name on it, and can I ship it out, and the reader can understand it? While we're on writing, let's talk about your book for a hot minute. If there's one big takeaway for parents from your book, what's the big takeaway?
So the big takeaway is that, again, you want to raise not a good student, but a scholar. And I have created an acronym out of the word scholar so that parents can understand that. And so S is for studious. We usually get that right. We know we want our kids to have good grades, but then we also want them to be community minded. We want them to be holistically developed. That is learning leadership skills and building your values from places outside of the classroom. We also want them to be organized. So this process takes a lot of making sure that all of the things are in order. And we want them to be organized leaders and relationship builders. And we often don't realize how much leadership and initiative plays into the types of colleges and scholarships that you will have access to, but it does. And then the last one is the relationship builder, because again, while your student can show up really strong, parents don't realize how much letters of recommendation can really help their student. And so if you have a child that's just focused on getting A's and B's, but if not built relationships with adults in their life, with their administrators at school and places like that, you won't have a good enough variety of letters of recommendation. Whereas everybody can talk to their academic standing, but if you get 4 letters from academic teachers, you don't get to learn a lot about the student. Whereas if you have a variety of people people talking about the student from a different context, then scholarship panels and college admission officers get to see the student more holistically.
Interesting. No one's ever put it that way, but the relationship building, we call it in the professional world, we call it networking, right? And the number of people that have realized the power of networking is immense. The number of people that realize how important it is before they're stuck in their little bubbles with their cell phones or their iPads or whatever, narrowing that network capability. So the communication standards to get a successful launch into higher ed and then subsequently out of higher ed is huge. How do you create a mentor if you never talk to anyone? How do you create a mentor if you never ask a question? That's one of the themes that has held true for, we've done 200 episodes now or close to it. Every single person that we've ever interviewed had some mentor, some network person that helped guide their pathway forward.
A couple of things that I wanted to tie together. So obviously you mentioned the scholarship that had 8 essays. How much do parents miss the understanding of how like winning a scholarship like that and putting in all of that effort also depends on if it actually comes to fruition on where you get accepted and where you go to school? Because that some of those scholarships essentially aren't, you put in all this work and then all of a sudden you get into a school, but it doesn't necessarily help any further. What do parents need to know about that relationship between outside scholarships and schools themselves?
Yeah. For some of the major competitive scholarships, and that's the thing, I don't think of it as like a student wasting their time because the scholarship criteria is more rigid than the college admission criteria. If you were at a 3.0 and Gates needs you to be at a 3.5, then you wouldn't even apply. So there's one to help students and parents save time. One thing that I think helps parents though, for something like the Gates Scholarship or the Dell Coca-Cola, right? Any of those scholarships. What I didn't know until I was coaching students through the process is that it opens up more doors for you than not. So if a school knows that you have this scholarship money coming in, because colleges are looking to graduate students, right? Not just enroll them. They know, like, even if a family is coming with need, but you're bringing your own money to the institution, it's a much higher probability for you to actually be able to get through and for you to graduate. Someone from an Ivy League university wanted to meet with me because she said, if you're getting these types of students, we want to talk with you. And the thing was, I didn't realize at the time, but some schools will reassign their scholarship awards, right? And so if you're coming in with outside money that can go to any school in the country, you become even a more attractive candidate for some of the schools that you might not have been their top pick for. So that's one thing. I would definitely have my students applying because there are scholarships that are available to students as early as 9th grade year when they're in high school. So I would definitely have my student doing this practice so that they are considered a more attractive candidate for even the more selective schools. So I think that it works in their favor to go for the ones that they're eligible for. There is, though, a risk that you take, right? So my kid can be writing all of these essays, and then at the end of their college application season, maybe they applied for $50,000 in scholarships and they only got 10. It's still $10,000 more dollars that's not coming out of your pocket. It's helping them build stronger writing skills, and it's helping them also understand that there's not just a value to college attainment, but there's a cost. And so I encourage parents to build it in because we know that most students aren't going to win every scholarship that they apply for. The difference, though, is that even for the scholarship applications that might require those essays, we will repurpose the essay. So it's never a waste, right? So by the time you got through that Gates scholarship process, there's almost nothing, another prompt that you'll get that you can't repurpose one of those essays for. And so that goes for college admission as well. And that's, I like for parents and students to be thinking about what are the essay prompts, because that's one way to get through this application process. Which narrative do I already have ready to go that I can ship out the door?
Yeah, I like how you phrase that because the one thing I hear a lot when the onion gets peeled back and you kind of say, well, if I spend all this time on these outside scholarships and I get into Cornell, Penn, like any of the Ivy Leagues, like all they're going to do is instead of giving me the amount they were going to give me, if I get a $20,000 scholarship and they were going to give me 60 grand, they're only going to give me 40 now. And because they're just going to replace that 20. And people say, okay, well then what's the why go through all the hustle? But now you kind of say, well, that actually makes you look more attractive to those schools because now they get to use somebody else. Other people's money is the best type of money that's out there. Same type of concept from the school. They don't have to dip into their own pockets to come to you. So it become a little bit more attractive.
If you just think about it from a admission standpoint, if you're sitting there at the end of the season and you've got two candidates, one that put in a whole bunch of time, effort, and energy to an outside scholarship and one that didn't do anything.
Yep.
Both have equivalent GPAs and scores. One of them's a go-getter. One of them has already shown a follow-through capability. All schools are chasing that graduation rate. We saw a steep dive from COVID and beyond in the retention rate, number one, staying, and then the graduation rate expanding. Cool insight on the stickiness of some of those efforts, that schools are always looking for a way to distinguish the student that can, number one, hack it at their institution, and number two, will follow through and finish at their institution. They're looking for any metric they can to determine that. And the earlier they can determine it, the better. And so great insight for you look different when you put in that effort. One of the things that Joe and I have been preaching for 2 decades now is take your time, do the research, commit to it like it's a $500,000 expense, because at the end of the day, it can be. So take it seriously. And for families with multiple kids that are heading that direction, like that's one kid can cost $400,000 right, if you play it wrong. I have 4. So 4 kids at 400,000, right? That's 1.6 million. That's a lot of money.
Yeah. You going to spend that, Dave?
No, not a shot. I love that because we've talked a lot about demonstrated interest recently with the advent of the CRM systems and the capabilities of the Salesforce systems around the world. They're paying attention to what you're doing, what you're clicking, what you're attending, what you're doing. And make no mistake, it is something that they can watch. And if they can easily correlate that to probability of attending and then probability of graduating, and you get your 0 probability of actually coming, 0 probability of actually graduating, you're not getting admitted. And so you have to achieve that barrier to entry, which is the admission first. So do what you can to look like a rock star. And I think that scholarship stuff matters.
Nail on the head, Dave. One other thing that I wanted to make sure that I asked you is I think there are almost 2 opposite ends of the spectrum when it comes to paying for college. It's families that say it's too expensive, we're not going to go, we can't afford it. And again, just being educated on how the system works, that it could be affordable. And then on the other end of the spectrum are the families that say we'll just get scholarships to pay for college and assume that it's going to happen. For the families that are on the one end of the spectrum about the scholarship side, do you discuss in the book, do you talk with families that you help, hey, there's still going to be a financial commitment after this, and like you said, you might plan and apply for 50,000 but might only get 5 or 10. Is there any advice that you essentially guide families on and saying, hey, like there's a strong pathway to make yourself look good, putting in the work for the scholarship, becoming that scholar, right, is going to help with the admission side as well. These are all one big thing, but at the end of the day, there's still a bill. So how do you kind of manage that with some of the families, and what are the expectations that parents really should know when it comes to, hey, scholarships?
So to answer your question, Joe, I don't cover that in the book. The book really is taking a parent through kind of like my scholarship process for students. And the last segment is what to write and how to approach a scholarship interview. But there are different demographics of students and parents. And so I've worked with students who have been able to secure enough scholarships that they actually have a surplus of scholarships. And then they actually do get a true refund when they go to college because they're able to use those funds and maybe fund like a study abroad or something like that, or just their day-to-day so that they can be focused and in school. As I'm working with students and families that have higher income, I want them to think about this as a part of their strategy. One of the things that I think is really important, and as a mom, I know that we're willing to sacrifice so much for our kids, but I'm not willing to sacrifice my retirement, right?
Sure.
So I want parents to see this this as a financial planning tool, and to know best case scenario is your kid gets a full ride. But still, right, full rides are less and less common. So really what I'm referring to is full tuition, right? And so best case scenario is that your kid gets full tuition, but then you still have to pay for travel and transportation. You have to pay for room and board and all of those things. So for me, what I'm trying to do is help parents see this as part of their financial planning so that when they get to the end and they realize there's still a cost, they don't have to resort to private student loans or go in debt themselves with the Parent Plus loans if your child could have done more work around scholarship attainment beforehand. Those are the things that I want parents to understand. There's no guarantee, but with the right strategy, we can definitely get your kid more money than probably you were anticipating than not, because a lot of parents that are like in the six-figure income range are just totally deciding that their kid is not going to get any scholarships because they think that need-based aid is synonymous with scholarships. And there are scholarships that exist for students that are coming from households that are six figures.
Love it. All right. So give us again, where can families connect with you and access your scholarship programs and resources?
Yeah. So capturegreatness.org is the portal to me. If parents want to speak with me directly or have questions, that would be on LinkedIn.
Okay, very good. And then the last question I'll ask, what's next for you? Where do you take this, new books, tools, initiatives? Where are you going from here?
I'm working on a program for moms in particular. My daughter's 4, so I did most of this work before I became a mom. And when I became a mom, I realized how real it is as a parent to be going through this process. And so really, I'm working on more content in a community for moms to help them get their students into scholar status much earlier on.
Love it.
All right. That's all I got for today.
Yeah.
Melissa, appreciate you being with us. Great,
Thank you,
great
Dave.
interview, great insight. Again, this is Melissa Rowe, author of Scholars Get Dollars, and you can find her at capturegreatness.org.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Yeah.
You got it.
Great stuff. Thank you so much.
All right, everyone. That's college knowledge.